We're like the mercenaries. We get brought in when companies or insurance companies don't do what's right, and nobody's going to give away money for free.
We've worked on cases all over the state. We've been down in the valley for years, working in cases in Stark County, Brownsville.
It's always going to be you versus the insurance company, no matter what they say. It's one call. Get you all, man. It's set it and forget it. I will take care of you from beginning to end.
Hi, this is Hamilton Rucker and attorney Colby Lewis. Today, we're going to get together and kind of just have an informal chat about our 10 years of working together as lawyers here in Houston, Texas, and cover everything from personal injury to construction litigation and everything, auto accident cases, kind of run the gambit of everything that we've worked on as attorneys together and individually over the last 10 years. Colby, if you can, why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Colby Lewis. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas, and just to give you a little bit of background about me, my path to being a lawyer was a little more unconventional. After some setbacks in high school, I worked minimum wage jobs to be able to get my way through community college. And after obtaining so many hours, was awarded a seat and earned my way into UT Austin. And then I came here to Houston for law school, graduated in 2005. And I've been practicing in litigation, particularly civil litigation, courtroom, trial work since 2005. One of my first cases out of law school was the Enron lawsuit, which is still one of the biggest civil recoveries in history. That was $7.3 billion. We went through enough paper that would fill the Astrodome in that case. And since then, I've worked on every single type of case you could possibly think of, from the biggest to the smallest. And I have been very fortunate to be able to help people recover millions of dollars and help people along the way. Now, along that way, I've kind of got involved in personal injury and construction defect. I met Hamilton in around 2015. I believe it was at a cigar bar. And Hamilton and I eventually were opposing counsel at first on a case together. And we got along really well. And I left a partnership at a regional law firm, and I went out on my own because I had decided that defending the indefensible insurance companies and big corporations was no longer in my best health interest. And Hamilton reached out. And ever since then, we've been rocking and rolling.
Yeah, man, we've worked on cases all over the state. We've been down in the valley for years, working in cases in Stark County, Brownsville,
Zapata County,
and then we've went off places in Dallas and did work there, and we've been in San Antonio working on.
You've been all the way to Ethiopia and across the pond, right?
That's right. We did some of those cases for Boeing, the Boeing plane crash cases in Ethiopia, and got the chance to work with clients in Kenya and Ethiopia. So we've kind of been everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's hard to describe to people. I don't know if you have this, but it's hard to describe to people kind of what we do sometimes, because when it comes down to it, we're like the mercenaries. We get brought in when companies or insurance companies don't do what's right, and nobody's going to give away money for free. And it requires some effort. One of our famous attorneys said, nobody's going to give you money for free. You got to punch them in the face. So you have
a real good point about something, is that like this mercenary view. And when you're talking to clients about, hey, what do you offer? What are your offerings? Do you find that a little confusing sometimes to communicate to your clients about what exactly you can do for them and what exactly is your practice specifically?
Yeah, it is difficult because every client that comes to you has a preconceived notion of what a lawyer should be, whether that be from all the way from they only say one thing and the lawyer swoops in and takes care of everything, all the way to the gamut of they're going to be highly involved in the case and they're going to be the quarterback directing you in what to do. Ultimately, what happens is that you have to counsel your client. And so what that means is a lot like a doctor, because we're both professionals, we have to educate our clients on what it is we can do and what it is we can't do. We have to make sure that the clients understand that this is not an eye for eye justice system. We can only resolve issues with money. So we have to be able to take your harms and reduce it to money somehow. And some people don't understand that. Some people want revenge. Some people want me to go force somebody to go do something. And I can't do that. And I can't reverse actions that have already occurred. My job is to go in after the fact and get the best result I can. And Hamilton, I
That's a
know.
really good point. So
Yes.
what you kind of brought up is kind of how does a client make a decision to try to hire someone like yourself or someone like me when you have the potential to offer all these really amazing services to them? You have to be the one to kind of set the boundaries for the client to tell them what you can and can't do, and they have to be able to trust you. So what are really some of the things that in the steps that a potential client should go through when trying to find an attorney and determine like if you're the right person for them?
Exactly. It is a judgment call. At the end of the day, there is no guarantor of this is the best attorney. And in fact, the best attorney might not be the best attorney for you because it is a personal relationship. Right? You have to feel good about your attorney. You have to be willing to talk to your attorney. You have to be willing to trust your attorney. If you don't trust your attorney, then you're not going to trust his judgment. Then there's no reason to talk to him. And I always tell people it's amazing to me how many people pay for attorney advice but don't follow it. Because if you don't trust your attorney, you're not going to follow your attorney's advice. And the attorney is there for your best interest. And when you're evaluating an attorney, that's one thing you need to consider is the personal relationship. How do they make you feel? Do they make you feel okay? Do you feel like you're in good hands?
So that's a good point also, right? So trusting that attorney, how many times, and you know, we've done this a few times with clients that we know that we have the client's best interest and we might have to hire another attorney to help us with the case. And so maybe that reduces our fee or causes us to have to work with other people. And then we have to explain that to the client. When you do that, don't you think that when you're bringing in someone else that you're always doing it for their best interest, even though it might hurt you in the long run financially?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that as a lawyer, I have what's called a fiduciary duty to my client. And what that means is that I actually have to put my client's needs above my own. So if you take a typical, what we do is called a contingency fee agreement. This is what you see on the billboards or in the news or anything else where it says, no fee unless we win. Well, what that means is contingent upon us winning, you'll owe us a fee. That's why it's called a contingency fee contract. And the contingency fee is represented in percentages. So it's usually a percentage of the amount collected goes to the lawyer for the fee. Now, this is a very interesting system because it actually economically incentivizes the lawyer to get a better result for you, right? If, for example, I go make $100 million on your case, that's a lot better than making $100,000 on your case. Of course, in both cases, the financial incentive is directly to me. So when I have to bring on other attorneys, it's only because I have a fiduciary duty. If it wasn't a fiduciary duty, then maybe somebody might put their own profit motive. Well, if I have to bring on another attorney and pay them, then I'm not going to get as much money because it does kind of cut into the attorney's percentage. But the reality of the fact is I want to win, pure and simple. And it doesn't matter what I do as long as we're winning. If that means I bring in a specialist, I bring in a specialist. I have a case right now, a medical malpractice case in Arizona. I have to bring in a local attorney and I have to bring in a specialist just on this particular technical issue.
So explain to the listeners, anybody out there, what is a local attorney and why would the attorney you hire even need one?
That's a great question, Hamilton. Law is not just being on the books. Law is just not these letters. Law actually requires presence. Law requires relationships. Law requires being in court, even though after COVID, a lot of our work is through Zoom and a lot of the communications we're going to have with our clients are in Zoom. There are still courts and that require in-person attendance. Now, I do work all across the nation. And I'm not familiar with, say, what the local rule or who, is the best person to get Burger King from or in Marshall, Texas, or who's the best judge. Now, there are people in Marshall, Texas who have been practicing there for 50 years, who know the judges, who know the clerks. And it is not a smart idea to try to go in there and, I'm some big city lawyer when it is always better to be respectful of the local rules, the local bar.
So you're talking about you're talking about getting hometown. Like when you go into a place that's on the border of Mexico and Texas, and it's a whole different culture. and the people there are very close knit in the community. And those lawyers grew up with everybody on the jury. They know the judge. They go play golf with them or go hunt with them all the time. They know all the things about how that community might view your client and even like defend it. And when you're coming in from somewhere 200, 300 miles away, that could be a good thing for your client, but you might also need to know that you need some help locally to get some things done so that your client's story can be told.
No, you're exactly right. And I deal with a lot of clients that are in what's called the Rio Grande Valley, RGV, and they want the power, they want the money, they want the backing of the big city law firm, international law firm, big city, multi-city. We have the what's called the war chest to be able to afford the best experts. And you can't do that as a local counsel. You can't do that as a local attorney. The guy who's hanging up his shingle and doing criminal and civil can't afford to put up $500,000 to get the best endocrinologists so they can give you the best case possible. So with this approach, you get the best of both worlds. You get the local counsel, you get the big, high-powered national counsel, and guess what? It doesn't cost you any extra. It's the same fee regardless. The only person who it changes is the lawyer you signed up. But to the lawyer, it's not going to matter because they're only bringing them on to make your case better.
So, Colby, some of the main areas you work in are personal injury, construction, and insurance, right?
Yeah, those are the main areas I work in, but it's all just wrapped around civil trial. I'm a trial lawyer.
Right. And so as a trial lawyer, one thing you always need in your case is an expert. And you talked about that earlier, hiring the best experts. What exactly is an expert and what do they do for you in your case?
That's a great question, Hamilton. And look, what an expert is under the law is a person that's there to assist what's called a lay person. And the law has these terms sometimes that sound a little weird, but a lay person is considered like the average person, right? So if you ask the average person, how does a car work, for example, they'll say, well, you put the key in the ignition and it turns on. You don't need an expert for that, but what if you need an expert to say, well, how does a fuel injection system work? And the expert is a person that is there to assist what's called the fact finder, aka the jury, to learn about something so that they can apply the facts to come up with the law, which is what's called their finding, the jury finding. So you can have an expert in pretty much anything. And as Hamilton was implying, the law is very stringent. You just can't go in and say, well, I didn't have this and look at I have this a lot of times where people are like, look, I had this foundation problem and it's cracking and obviously it's because of this leak. And the obviously part is not what's accepted in the law. What's obvious to you is not obvious to a layperson, and therefore you need to go hire, because nobody's going to work for free, an expert. And those experts just aren't some, person you see on the street. They're usually lettered, credentialed, and have experience. Those are the requirements, especially under federal law, that you have to have in order to have an expert qualified to opine on it. And the other side can argue the expert isn't qualified. And so it's a whole fight.
So you and I have had cases in the past, BP cases where there are oil spills, construction cases, these big energy management deals, and the expert fees have been sometimes $1 million or more, $500,000, $200,000. So if I'm a client and I'm coming to you about my 18-wheeler accident case or a case about my building being destroyed in a hurricane or storm, who is going to pay that expert to show up and testify, and who's going to be responsible for paying that expert?
Well, as I said earlier, the contingency fee as contingent upon the success, and that goes for the expenses too. A lot of people don't realize that the reason the attorney is able to take what's called a contingency fee is because they put up with a lot of risk. If the case goes south, if something happens, there is no risk. There is no risk at all to the client. They get to walk away. The attorney is the one who has to front the expenses or pay the expenses on the front end in order to secure the victory for the client on the back end. If there is no victory secured for the client, then the attorney loses all that money. And you're right, Hamilton, we've been in cases where it's millions and millions of dollars and people are like, how do you have $1 million expense Well, when we point to the documents, I think in the Harlingen case, it was, I forgot how many gigs and gigs and gigs of documents. And the experts have to review all those because they're going to be deposed, and they have to know it. It's just like a professor being ready for a test, and they charge you by the hour. And in order to give you the best opinion, they are going to make sure that they're fully studied up. The expert fees get expensive. But the good thing is we don't waste money on cases we know don't have a chance. Hamilton, I know for a fact you and I have been very, very fortunate. We have very good case selection. People that are our clients, we don't take everyone, do we?
No, and as an attorney, you learn about case selection, and sometimes you make mistakes, and you take on a case that maybe you shouldn't have, and you have to communicate that to the client.
Yeah.
And tell the client, look, we've done some more investigation. This isn't a case that we can handle. Or you tell them that before you even get involved. And a lot of times that's a really tough discussion to have with the client or a potential client, that you can't really service their problem. And a lot of this is part of a business. And as much as we try to help people and fight for them, there's a lot of things that are on our side that we have to be careful of, to make sure that we're doing the best by our clients, and that we're doing what's ethical under the state bar rules. And so that a lot of that comes down to what the risks are. So Colby, I want to ask you more about risk, because you talked about this, about the contingency fee and what the risks are. So explain to me about going to trial versus settling, and why you might encourage a client to do either one of those.
Yeah, this is a very good and a very complex issue. And I'm not here to tell you that the way I'm about to tell you is the right way. It is a point of art in trial law. How can we get the best results for our clients, but realize that there is a diminishing return in some respects? Let me explain that. So when you go through incident, whether it be personal injury, whether it be a storm claim, whether it be construction defect claim, whether it be, denial of insurance claim, it's always going to be you versus the insurance company. No matter what they say, this is the defendant. No, it's you versus the insurance company. You are not going up against that in person. You're going up against the insurance company. And the reason for that is because the insurance company is guaranteed payment. If you have a $30,000 judgment against the insurance company, they're going to pay it. If you have a $30,000 judgment against Robert Smith, he's not required to pay it. You have to go enforce it. And then you can't get his house because of the homestead exemption. And then you can't garnish his wages because you're not the federal government. And then even if you get all the way through that, he still doesn't have to pay you because he can declare bankruptcy. And the best thing you might be able to do is attach his judgment to the land if they own anything. A lot of times they don't. So at the end of the day, the only real way to get recovery is through the insurance company. Now, if there's anything over what the insurance company covers, you're in the same boat. So if you get a recovery for $100 million and Robert Smith is only covered for $30,000, guess what? Same problem. So the deal is, the rationale is that if you settled, you're guaranteed closure. As soon as you sign that document, everything goes away. You get a check. Now, that is settling a case. When you go to trial, and I've had this conversation with a lot of my clients, no matter how good your case is, even if we got them on video, even if we got them dead to rights, you just don't know how the jury's going to go. You just don't know which jury you're going to get. And at the end of the day, I don't have the ability to pick and choose directly who's going to sit in that jury. And the other thing to consider is expert fees, is expenses. Those experts that we need to come testify, well, they'll charge us per hour while they're waiting to testify. You have people come and make presentations in the courtroom, foam boards, audio, visual, extra time for the secretaries and staff. All that adds up. And as the expenses get bigger and bigger, it necessarily reduces the client's take home. So I always talk to my clients about this when we're evaluating a case. It could take 2 to 3 years for a trial to fully develop and get a jury verdict. In the meantime, they could also just stretch it out for 2 to 3 years. But over here, with settlement, you can get peace of mind now. And over here with trial, your recovery can actually be quite reduced because of the expenses growing. And what is the delta, or what is the difference between settlement and trial? If you can settle here for $75,000 or $75,000, and then over here you win at trial for $150, but it costs you $85,000 in expenses to get to here, you're actually making less money. So as the counsel and the attorney for my clients, with my fiduciary duty and my obligation to get the most money in my client's pocket as possible, that's the evaluation I have to explain to my clients when I counsel them on whether or not we should settle now or take it to trial.
But when you're having that discussion, there's so much emotion that goes into it, because a lot of times our clients have been having to deal with these problems with an insurance company or someone who injured them for months, if not years. And sometimes these cases drag on forever. And the clients are so frustrated, they're emotionally drained. And a lot of times by the time they get to the point where they're getting to a mediation and they're starting to be offered money to settle the case, and it's been 2 years or 3 years, saying, I don't care anymore. I want to go to trial. And how do you kind of work through that with the client to let them know, look, all I can do is this for you. I can't be a sword of vengeance, right? I can just be a person who is going to get you some type of compensation.
Yeah. And that goes back to what we were discussing before. We're not an eye for eye civil system. We get money, right? And at the end of the day, it's a value calculation. And it's hard for people to understand sometimes. As I try to, the very simple example I use is, you say you get involved, you're in a construction accident, and completely at the fault of the other person, and you fall, you hit your head, and you have, $5,000 in medical. You had a little bump on your head, and you're like, Colby, I want to sue. Okay, they're not being reasonable. I get it. Well, what's reasonable in your head? Well, I want $1 million. And you're like, well, look, man, at the end of the day, if you only have $5,000 in medical expenses, a reasonable juror isn't going to be like, well, you spent 1 day in the hospital and you went back to work. That's worth $1 million in mental anguish. No reasonable juror is going to do that. So a lot of what I do when I'm dealing with clients like that is what's called managing expectations. And I have to educate them in the law, because people see these judgments, people hear about these things, and they only hear what the news media or propaganda or whatever it is. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes, so that, $1 or $2 or $3 million verdict you see on the billboard, you don't know what the circumstances are there. And it's really important that when you're talking to your attorney, you're listening to your attorney, because the attorney is going to be there to explain, hey, look, this is the way the law really works. Let me explain it. This is not TV. This is not hopes and dreams and pie in the sky. The law is here to reimburse you for what was taken from you. It's not a bingo award or lottery award. It's to make you back in the same place you were. And educating our clients is sometimes difficult, but very, very necessary.
That's a really sage advice about how often you have to work to educate your clients and kind of keep them up to date on what's going on, and then kind of like check those expectations, because everyone sees all this information and data from everywhere. And it's really hard to try to give that to the client, is that, look, this is what I do every day. I know this. I've seen this hundreds of times. Just pulling something off Google doesn't mean that that's actually what happened. And I kind of want to segue in that to another thing, is that there's so much information and data out there. How, as a lawyer, are you seeing your profession change because of AI? Like, how often are you using things like ChatGPT or DeepSeek in your everyday practice? And do you think that could probably replace you, and clients could just use that to get what they want for themselves?
That's a very good question. I gave a presentation in Florida to a room full of lawyers, all hush hush, in March 2 years ago, I think, or around there, when ChatGPT first came out. Nobody had heard about her. Nobody had seen Dolly. Nobody had seen any of this stuff. And I pulled out a phone and I transcribed the whole thing, and I showed them what we could do. And what did some of those lawyers do? They ran out and tried to create briefs immediately after I gave them the demonstration. And they became the people that you saw in the news, like lawyers that did legal work without even checking it. And I tell that story not as a way to like out any of my colleagues, but as a warning for people who think that, oh, well, now we've got, the ChatGPTs and everything else. Well, look, I use it personally on a daily basis. And anybody that doesn't say they're doing it is either a fool or they're lying to you, quite honestly. The importance of it and the use of it depends on the skill of the user. And what I mean by that is, I'm running analytics, I'm running closed environments. I've preloaded up, I've got custom GPTs, I've got servers running it. This is a lot different than somebody who's just searching on Google and doing that. But at the end of the day, I would never just expect it to do the legal work for me because, and this is the important part, everything we do requires judgment. And the reason for that, and the reason I had to spend 3 years in law school is not because I'm stupid, and let me tell you, I am pretty stupid. It's not that I couldn't memorize rules that were, hey, look, this is black, this is white, because if everything was black and white, they could just throw a rule book at me and tell me to memorize these rules. And this is justice. Do this in this case and this in this case. But guess what? There are no rules like that. Everything is gray. So they call them bright line rules in the law, right? Above here, right? But it's always arguing. Where is the line really? And that's the difference between an advocate and somebody who's just reading text.
So I like that because that's what I always tell my clients. My practice is I do litigation, practice of insurance and construction, but I'm also in the area of real estate and helping clients do real estate transactions. And
yeah,
I also have
awesome, man.
I also have athlete clients that we advise on a daily basis to help get through their processes. And, they all are. A lot of my clients are really sophisticated. I had a real estate client recently who was buying a $1.8 million house. And he was a really sharp guy. And what he was doing is he was taking all the contracts, HOA documents, and he was uploading them to ChatGPT. And then he was using that and searching through it to find different things he had questions on. And then he would come back to me with the questions to verify. And it was a really cool tool for him to use to do some of the work on his own, to come back to me with more informed questions. And what would happen is, as an advocate myself, as an attorney, I had to go back to the sellers and the seller's agents and the lender and talk to them about these issues that he had. And I had to advocate for why they should either be changed or they should be altered in some kind of way. And that tool was really helpful, but it couldn't be the end all be all for him because the tool couldn't advocate for him. And as a professional and someone who's worked in this area for over 15 years as an attorney and over 20 years as a real estate professional, we have certain things, certain ability to advocate for our clients and work for them to advance their interest, to make things better for them. And no matter how you try to do that with a ChatGPT, it's not going to be able to give you those intangibles. So that's really where I kind of see how technology and lawyers are kind of fusing themselves together.
I think you're really selling yourself short. Now, everybody, I know Hamilton from a long time now, and he is like multi-talented. And the reason I bring that up is because, it's one thing to know the rules and like what Hamilton was talking about being an advocate. But the other thing that is important, and Hamilton is going to back me up 100% on this, is the experience, right? Hamilton can bring real estate experience and bring that into construction law when we're dealing with cases. Oh, this is a bond issue. I've done bond issues, baby. I know what I'm talking about. This milieu, this mix allows to have a more comprehensive, holistic approach to the law, right? And what I try to explain to people is like this. There's the law, and then there's reality, or what people call pragmatic, right? Hey, Colby, I want to go sue him. Oh, really? Okay, well, let's tell you what the law is. The law says you can go sue him. Yeah. And you can go do this, but it's going to cost you $1,500 to him, and you only are suing over $200. Pragmatically, I'm going to tell you not to do that. But the ChatGPT doesn't have that concern. It doesn't have the experience to say, hey, this is a bad idea, because I know where it's going to lead to. I know the law says this is what's going to happen, but this is what really happens. And you've seen plenty of examples of that in our experience, like judges that don't rule on motions and our opponents are besides themselves. And, it's just the law. It's just what happens.
Well, I think we had a really good first conversation, Colby, and one that we're trying to promote there for everyone to see, especially people in Texas who are going to have issues and want to try to find an attorney and get some kind of resolution to their problems. So, but I want you to leave the viewer with some information, and possibly if you can give us maybe 3 or 4 different things that every viewer should know about litigation or hiring an attorney, or what they should really focus on if they're going to have a problem where they need to hire a Colby Lewis to represent them.
Yeah. So number one, once you pick your lawyer, stick with your lawyer. Don't second guess your lawyer. You're paying good money, or paying a contingency in order to get the best lawyer. Once you've got that lawyer, listen to your lawyer. Do what they say, because that's what you're paying for. Just because you read it on Google, just because you hear somebody say it, doesn't make it true, right? This is important because you don't need to be involved in the headache and the heartache of day-to-day litigation. You're paying for a concierge service. You're paying for what's called a turnkey service. You call me, and then you're only going to hear from me 3 or 4 or 5 times unless you want me to tell you more about your case. But it's a set it and forget it kind of thing. Hey, Colby, I'm in trouble. I'm there for you. And that's important because a lot of people get overwhelmed by
Say that again. Say that again for us, Colby.
Which part? It's one call. Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Tell me, if I call you, hey, Colby, I'm in trouble, what are you going to say?
It's one call. Get you all, man. It's set it and forget it. I will take care of you from beginning to end. My job is to take away the stress. My job is to take away the anxiety, because you have enough to worry about, whether you're trying to recover from an injury, whether you're trying to repair your house, whether you have this multi-million-dollar building that is leaking water and has roaches. You have other things to worry about rather than messing with insurance companies or fighting with people who truly will not see facts. They're designed to say no to anything. So what I want my clients to do is to trust and let me help them.
Well, that's great, man. I really appreciate the conversation today. We'll be back in the near future, and we're going to have some really awesome topics going forward. And if you need either one of us, you can find us online. We'll drop some information there in the description, which will have Colby's email and website, and my email and website if you need either one of us. And we appreciate it, and have a good one.